It's about that time. You got Cyber Swiss Army Knife Forrest with the color commentary. You got me here, your Chris Farley impersonator. I'm doing the play-by-play. We're kind of like Tony Romo and Jim Nance here. We're going to comment. We're going to try to decipher the top cyber stories that are going on right now. And we like to present the news in a very easy, digestible format with some lessons learned. Our top stories this week, we're going to cover the pipeline update. They paid the ransom. Unbelievable. Our second story that we need to talk about is the ransomware disruptions. A lot of service disruptions. And then Airtags, Forrest, getting hacked.
Yeah. It'll be fun getting into this one. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, so kindly smash the like button and please subscribe. We love when people join us, and we hope you get value out of this. And, if we get enough subscribers, we hit about 5,000 subscribers, I promised the audience for us that I would whip out my Chris Farley impersonation. So this should be a good show, folks. Hey, DJ, play that song. All right, Forrest, how do we even begin to describe this whole pipeline breach fiasco?
A disaster piece of monumental proportions, in my opinion.
Gosh, all these poor folks on the East Coast, you guys, I'm sure you've seen the news. You've had to see the news. They're all waiting in line, and the pipeline's been restored. And our job today is to try to describe some of the lessons learned. And we've been in quite a few briefings with the FBI and some other folks trying to learn what the heck happened, what can we take away from it as cyber professionals, and really try to share that information with you. But the bad guy in this situation for us is DarkSide.
Yeah, ransomware as a service. It's been so popular. It's the platform of choice for your ne'er-do-wells. So.
Yeah, bad guys love these guys, these ransomware as a service operators, and DarkSide is one such player in this market. They're known as like big game hunters, so they have some rules. They actually have policies for us on their dark web forum site. Now we've got to stress that there's a lot of stuff going on here, evolving parts of the story, including the actual DarkSide themselves has said we're shutting down operations. There's more to the story than that, but let's try to explain everything that we know. So clearly, what happened so far is DarkSide was involved in this breach. We know that they were able to control and manipulate some of the operations of the pipeline. We know that the victim in this case is a company called Colonial. We know that at least 4 of the pipelines, including the backups, were taken offline. We know that the initial intrusion vector is not actually been published yet.
Yeah, they're still investigating. They were very reticent to try and mention anything about that in the debriefing that we had from CISA and the FBI. It was pretty interesting just listening to the call and how many people were just raging. But that aside, it seems like the actual industrial control systems were not impacted, they had stated. Right. It appears that it was actually the billing systems primarily that were most impacted. And since they couldn't keep track of how much was flowing, they decided to shut it down so that they wouldn't just be hemorrhaging money. Yeah. So pretty interesting take there. It was down for about 6 days before they reactivated the pipeline. The biggest thing, with all the gas lines and everything, people panicking in an absolute nightmare of trying to get some gas. I thought it was pretty interesting that logistically they had done a lot to reroute things, and so there wasn't really the demand would have been met had people not panicked.
And that's the thing about panicking. Once one person starts panicking, like everyone else just gets right in line.
Virulent.
And I'm sure the audience, you guys have probably seen photos, memes on the web of people putting gasoline in baskets. Trash bags. Oh. But the way DarkSide operates is they are a ransomware as a service operator. So what you do is you go to their website, you establish a relationship with them, they begin to trust you, and the next thing you can do is become an affiliate of their site, which means you get access to some of their tools, and part of this then is they take a certain percentage cut out of whatever ransom you get. So this is where the story gets a little interesting, because it's the affiliates apparently, and that's the way DarkSide presented it, that the affiliates were behind this. They know the rules. The rules is you don't go after government institutions, hospitals, anybody that's in like education sector, but one of the affiliates did not follow the rules, and they did some real nasty stuff. So that's just part of what's happening in this story.
Yeah, there's a whole lot getting shaken up in the entire ransomware as a service scene, just across the board.
Yeah, and we'll get to that story in just a minute. But what we need to break down now is some lessons learned. And again, we mentioned we don't know the initial intrusion vector. We don't know if it's a phishing email. We don't know if it was an employee that clicked on a website that might have been malicious. So we're still waiting for those details. But there are some pieces of the puzzle that have been released. And I was amazed, Forrest, that in some of the press releases and some of the guidance that we've seen, the data that came out of this. And one of the things that caught my eye, and I just was blown away, that Colonial's emergency response plan, allegedly, it only focused on threats to physical safety and not so much on cyber incidents. That's a key takeaway right there. You missed something really critical. All you cared about was physical security.
Yeah. I think that's one thing, especially when it comes to like DHS. They've been primarily focused on kinetic or terrorist attacks where they're thinking somebody's trying to bomb it or whatever.
Yeah.
Not so much on the information security side of things. So I think this is going to bring a lot more scrutiny, and they're really going to have to tighten things up across the board.
Another thing that caught my eye about the lessons learned from this is that the Colonial thought the operational impact was less than severe. They didn't think it was as bad as what it actually turned out to be. And then they kind of went into this, we're going to do a limited emergency response procedures. And we all know what that means for us. It's like, you're not going to handle this problem the way it should be handled. And it's something like a 4-hour transition time is what I read to go into shutdown mode. And it just, the problems just snowballed from there. It just got worse.
Yeah. It's just seeing the response after the fact and trying to clean everything up has been very interesting.
Oh, and for us, some of the other things that I've read and taken away from this, lessons learned, folks, there were no tabletop exercises. There was no planning around the incident response. So it's not like they said, oh, hey, we've done this before in tabletop exercises and simulations, so we know how to respond. They didn't do any of that. And that's a key takeaway, folks. If you're out there and you have a business, you need to at least once or twice a year, bring somebody in that can help simulate what it would be like for an attack to happen in your business, and then plan out what's your role, how do we say, what do we do with the news media, how do we handle all those situations. They didn't do any of that.
I think a great source of tabletop exercises is the news. Just look what's happening and try to apply that to your own organization. Okay, let's imagine that system X got infected with ransomware Y. What do we do?
Yeah, how do we handle that? What do we do if customer data gets leaked? And what's going to be our response and our communication back to our customers, communication to the news media, all that stuff. But there are, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, they put out some lessons learned and things. I mean, it's your usual, you should be doing your usual cyber hygiene, enacting multi-factor authentication, spam filters, filtering your network traffic, limiting access, network segmentation. I mean, all those key words that we hear about in our industry.
Keeping your software up to date. I will harp on that over and over and over.
But Forrest, one of the things that caught my attention was, and CISA never really talks about this a lot, is this idea of one-way data diodes. Have you heard of this term before?
Yeah. You usually see that more in like industrial control systems where, you're only allowing one-way communication through a certain channel or path. Yeah.
Yeah. And guys and folks out there's so many activities and behaviors and actions you can do to shore up your defense, have that defense in depth strategy that apparently Colonial did not have. And that's one such thing. When you realize that the human negligence, and you realize that the human factor, humans are your first firewall in your business, you pay a lot of attention to that, right? You put a lot of effort into teaching employees about identifying things like phishing emails and so on. But the key takeaway that I always see in these industrial control systems is the discussion is never about one-way data diodes. They never really talk about that. And for the audience out there, what a diode is, it's this electronic component. It allows the current to flow in one direction only. And when you put these on your industrial control systems, you give the data transfer a chance to essentially terminate, and then it restarts again in a flow, in a different flow. So when it travels to the destination, you're giving it extra, what's the right word I want to use? Extra security is essentially. The bad guys can only do one thing, and that is see the current in one direction only and not out as well. So.
Yeah. You also see these kinds of things in, for instance, like forensics, disk forensics, where they're capturing images, where you have a write blocker, so you can connect a device and ensure that no data is actually able to be written. It's only able to be read off.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to jack up the integrity of the data. So, all right, so that's just part of the story. And Forrest, you go forward in time, and here we are today, and we learn that Colonial Pipeline paid a ransom.
Yep, $5 million.
So supposedly, allegedly, I'm seeing a bunch of different numbers thrown around. We do know that there's a vendor out there that actually tracks Bitcoin wallets, and they said that DarkSide's Bitcoin wallet was something like 5.3 million worth of digital currency. And then all of a sudden,
at that time,
and then the funds get drained. So we do have that piece of the story to go on. But the blackmail, the demand was met and paid.
It was interesting to see that they did this in tandem with their restoration efforts. So not only were they trying to restore from backups, but they also paid the ransom to try and get things going in parallel.
Which is mind-blowing, yeah. And you got to be real cautious about the whole idea of paying ransoms, especially based on your industry. And there's a lot of laws now in place, especially with Treasury Department and OFAC and all these other things, where if you wanted to pay, you couldn't pay. You shouldn't pay. And we'll talk more about that story in just a minute, because the country of Ireland just got breached, their healthcare services. And we'll talk about that story in a minute. But they refused to pay that ransom. So the key here, though, and Forrest, I thought was interesting, when they got the decryption key, when Colonial Pipeline got the decryption key, it was so slow that they weren't able to restore anything fast. They had to revert back to their old backups.
Yeah. So what was the point even?
Why did they pay?
The dark side said that all of their stuff got seized. Right? They go on blast and say, hey, we no longer have access to our blog, our SSH, like everything's shut down, and our crypto wallets are drained. And it's like, hold on, like, how did you have this set up? Like your payment server also had the private keys for your wallets on it? Like, big fail. My thoughts are they're probably just saying that they got shut down.
That's what I thought,
and they're
too.
cutting and run, just try and disappear, because it got way too hot, way too fast, way too much attention, where normally if it was a law enforcement action, law enforcement agencies love to shout from the rooftops like, we got them,
Right.
It's you love seeing the this page has been seized by whatever agencies. None of that was here.
No,
so I think they're full of it, and they're just trying to get away from the heat.
And the heat is really strong right now, and you're going to hear in just a minute all these stories of these ransomware service operators all being shut down or allegedly going on private, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But I have to explain that with ransomware as a service, DarkSide, for example, again, you go to them, you're an affiliate, you hire them, they actually take a cut. Their developers take a cut, and it's the cut is about 25% for us. If the ransom payment is under $500,000, they take 25%. All right, and then if the payment goes above $5 million, the cut reduces down to 10%. So DarkSide only gets 10%, which is pretty cool in that thought process where they're graduated payments. But DarkSide's been shut down allegedly, as we understand it. And the other piece of the puzzle here is Colonial does have cyber insurance.
Yeah. That's a real interesting aspect that we can get into in our story coming up about AXA.
Yeah. Oh gosh. But now the thing with these cyber insurance providers is a lot of companies, they'll do multiple, especially companies the size of Colonial, they will do multiple insurance providers. So they have Colonial, then they might spread some of that risk out over multiple insurance providers. So that's also part of the story. But we got to talk about all of the crazy shutdown and what's going on with that. So One of the cyber investigators out there, a company by the name of Intel 471, they basically said that they have evidence that ransomware operators, especially like DarkSide and stuff, they're abandoning ransomware altogether. They're shutting down. Did you hear about this story?
Yeah,
As part of it?
allegedly shutting down. Yeah. We'll see if they don't resurface as some different incarnation at some point. And attribution is always hard in these kinds of things. Like, if they've done their OPSEC properly, they're going to be able to disappear if they want to.
And they said something, DarkSide on their blog said something like an unnamed law enforcement agency took down their content delivery system. It took down their ransomware collection website, their payment systems, even their blog. They have this name and shame blog that they use. That was all taken down, allegedly. So you follow the numbers here, and this is where the story evolves. And that is when you bring that kind of heat, Forrest, and you go after a big game like the pipeline, and you're disrupting a country's airfares infrastructure, you're disrupting the truck infrastructure, cars, that's where you're going to start to have some nasty, nasty stuff. And this then happens, but then also they had the Washington, D.C. Police Department got breached as well, and they refused to pay the ransom on that. So you have these two big events in the news. You have the ransom demand for Colonial Pipeline, and you have the DC stuff. And that's where all of a sudden now, this is where we're at today, all of these ransomware operators, I don't think we're going to be in business much longer. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, when you're, going around indiscriminately infecting different systems, don't be surprised if you piss somebody off.
Oh my gosh! So the DC breach that we just mentioned, the police department got hit, and what we know from it is this group called the Babook. I'm gonna butcher these names. I'm sorry, folks. The Babook ransomware gang. I can never pronounce them for us. They demanded a ransom of like $4 million to get access for the police department in DC to get all their stuff back. We do know that in that specific breach, some of the data that was involved.
Yeah. They had all kinds of really juicy details, officers' psychiatric evaluations, all kinds of identifiable information. There was emails, addresses, phone numbers, driver license numbers, signatures, like handwritten signatures were part of that. There was all kinds of stuff that they had in there. And yeah, they came out with this ask of $4 million, and Metro PD came back and said, well, how about 100,000? And
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, that's like less than 0.1% of your annual operating budget. I don't think they're gonna go for that. Like, nice try, but like they know how much you're getting every year. That stuff's public information, and even if it wasn't, they probably got it from you when they breached you. So,
And the chat logs got released from that negotiation, which is fascinating stuff. And we'll put up an example of that on the screen here in just a second. But when you look at these chat logs and you see how they're trying to negotiate, and you go, oh, this is not probably the right approach to negotiating ransom payment.
yeah, very, very argumentative.
Yeah, very terse, to the point. This is the way we're going to do it. I felt like I was watching an episode of like Law and Order on TV, just the way they were trying to do it. So
Not how it plays out, IRL. Yeah.
But what's going on with the group that hit the DC people is they got shut down. In fact, they put out this blog. Babook put out this blog and basically said, hey, ransomware as a service, we're not going to do it anymore. We're going to close. We're not going to encrypt information on anyone's networks anymore. And then the fallout started happening. It was like this crazy cascading waterfall of all these ransomware operators saying, we're not going to do this anymore, and we're going to go underground. We're going to go private. And then the story is evolving even further now. Groups like Avidon, the ransomware operator, they said they're changing their operations. You're not allowed to target hospitals. You're not allowed to go after public sector folks, government agencies, that kind of stuff.
Specific countries.
Yes,
It's getting geopolitical.
And then Revel, which is another ransomware operator, they announced also they're going to change their operations. So we'll put up an example here on graphic as well of how they're changing their policies. But I mean, Forrest, these ransomware operators, they're not going away. They're always going to be around. But what they're saying is we're going to go more private and we're going to become more exclusive. So if you want to do business with us and become an affiliate, you're going to have to play by our rules, and we're not going to be so trusting and allow anybody to walk in off the dark web and and start up an affiliation with us.
Yeah. I can't just buy it off the shelf anymore. You gotta have cred now. So you know, it's definitely getting a lot more like traditional organized crime in that sense, where it's this very closed off, tight knit kind of, you need to know somebody to be able to get in and operate. So just kind of a weird shift in the dynamics of it, where, you know, before now it's been very, you know,
public. Yeah, they have blogs. These, I mean, you know, we saw that with that ransomware operator that hit Colonial. They did that. They have a blog forward facing in the front of the internet. Anybody can see what they're doing. So, but you know, not just those operators as a service being shut down, but all of these hacking forums, XSS forum, exploit forum, raid forum. These ransomware gangs, Forrest, they're going to stop advertising apparently on all these forums altogether. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. I think over the next year we'll see how it actually ends up playing out. I think it's still going to be a thing, but it's just going to be a lot of misdirection and trying to dodge attribution and going even more, cards close to the chest.
It's like when you turn on the lights and all the rats and the mice scatter. That's what's happening right now, folks. And it's just fascinating to watch this all play out. So there's a couple other things going on today. We got to switch gears and talk about another big breach in the news. AXA, you're the one that told me about this from Graham Cooley's site. I forgot all about this.
This one's really interesting. So AXA is a cyber insurance company. So they actually made an announcement a little over a week ago saying that they would no longer pay ransoms for ransomware. So it was a pretty big move for them to come out and just out and out say that. And then, within a week, they themselves got hit with ransomware. So pretty interesting stuff that, kind of painted a target on themselves by doing that. But also, they're going to have to double down at that point. If they're really going to stick to their guns, put your money where your mouth is kind of thing. Like, get into the recovery effort, and hopefully you've got backups.
And Abaddon ransomware gang is who's being attributed to the AXA thing. And what's fascinating too, I mean, it's so awkward for a cyber insurance carrier. And they don't just do cyber insurance; they do health insurance, they do travel insurance. But the 3 terabytes of data, I heard something like that.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. They had all kinds of personally identifiable information. They had passport scans. Pretty big there. They had different kinds of IDs that were getting scanned, medical records, hospital bills, claims, all that kind of stuff. So some pretty hot ticket information there.
And the lesson learned here is what you're seeing is a lot of these ransomware gangs is they're specifically targeting companies that have cyber insurance, and it's almost like a double dip. I can go after the company like Colonial Pipeline, and then I can now go after the cyber insurance carrier as well and hit them up. So fascinating stuff, folks.
It was pretty interesting that some ransomware groups said that they would specifically target companies that they knew had cyber insurance because they were more likely to pay. And now, if they're starting to change that trend across the board, then maybe that may not be the case. One interesting carve out, though, was that they said they will still cover ransomware recovery services. So incident response for recovery, but there was a bunch of reporting, I think it was done by ProPublica, showing that some of those ransomware recovery services were actually they themselves just turning around and paying the ransom and then getting the data back that way.
I missed that.
So it's an interesting, weird little loophole that maybe, I don't know if they're going to do some additional scrutiny on these recovery services to prevent that kind of stuff or what may happen there. It'll be interesting to see what comes down the line.
Forrest, do you like Lucky Charms?
Oh, yes. Magically delicious.
Magically delicious. We got to talk about Ireland. I love their playbook. I wish more countries would do this. We won't pay the ransom. So Ireland's health services got breached about a week ago. They announced it on May 14th. They got hit with ransomware, significant impact to their operations. People can't get medical appointments, all that stuff, x-rays and so on. What I love about their playbook in Ireland, they don't pay ransom.
Yep, straight up. They're not budging, and they are very hard line on that. And it's, even despite this massive, ransomware takedown of their systems, they're still doing a lot of, all the critical care services are still available. It's mostly stuff that is, scheduled out, like you said, imaging, lab work, things like that. But it's I think this is a very risky move to target a healthcare system in this regard. That's just going to really turn up the heat. And just bring all the more scrutiny against you that you probably don't want.
No, but what's great about the Ireland playbook, Forrest, is they're not paying, and that sets a precedent to the bad guys. Like, oh, this whole country is not going to pay ransoms. Maybe we're not going to spend so much energy, effort, and time going after Ireland and trying to get their lucky charms. So it's good stuff. All right, man. We got to talk about our top stories now and the Frag Attacks. You ever watch Fraggle Rock, Forrest?
Oh, it's been a minute. Oh, man.
Down to Fraggle Rock.
That's a trip in the Wayback Machine.
Man, I love Fraggle Rock, dude. Frag Attacks, this researcher found some vulnerabilities. Have you dived into any of this? Because I love Frag Attacks. I love this story. Wi-Fi vulnerabilities fascinate me.
Yeah. Packet fragmentation. Just splitting up your packets into get reassembled by the AP. A lot of the time this is it's done. It's not commonly done unless it's on Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi 6 uses a lot more fragmentation just to try and get more throughput and speed increase. It's very reminiscent of like Spectre or Meltdown, where
yes.
we've done these weird hacky things to try and increase throughput and performance, and now it's coming back to bite us.
Yeah. For the audience at home, the security researcher was able to find about a dozen or so vulnerabilities in Wi-Fi, and it impacts anything that uses Wi-Fi. So if you've got an Apple product, a Zeus, Dell, Lancome, Aruba, you name it, Canon, it's going to be impacted by these vulnerabilities.
If it's Wi-Fi, it's pwnable at this point.
Yeah. Right. And apparently the story goes that the researcher was able to find both design flaws and implementation flaws. And obviously we don't have time to go into all these CVEs, but it's well worth your time. We'll include the link, and you can definitely take a look at it.
Definitely hope your gear is still supported and getting updated.
Yeah. We got just, I think, 2 or 3 more stories here, and we got to cover. And MageCart, which, if you're not familiar with shopping cart skimmers and how they work, I mean, they're out of control nowadays, folks. And this group called MageCart Group 12, and what they're doing with the skimmer is they're hiding it in the favicons. How do you describe a favicon for us?
Yeah, that cute little pretty picture right up in your tab up at the top of the screen.
When you surf the web, you've got your little tabs at the top and that little icon. Well, the bad guys are hiding malicious code, basically PHP web shells inside the favicons. Yep. It's brilliant.
Yeah,
how it happens.
Bunch of requests for all these different pictures, and then it's actually just reassembling from all those different images this web shell. It's pretty clever, pretty scummy, but as you do when you're a thief online, I suppose.
What I thought was interesting, I reached out to our team. We have this product here at SecurityMetrics. It's called the Shopping Cart Monitor, and talking with them, hey, have we seen this in the wild? And we have, and can we potentially stop it using our Shopping Cart Monitor tool? And the word that I got back is yes, it's part of our capabilities here at SecurityMetrics. So if you are concerned about that, definitely reach out to us here at SM, and we'll have that conversation with you about shopping cart skimmers. So, all right, Forrest, let's talk about this one weird trick, Krebs on security. I know you had to love this story. One weird defense trick. What is it? What is Krebs talking about? Brian Krebs?
So there's an interesting thing. This goes back to like all the geopolitical stuff, right? Where you have a lot of these cybercrime gangs that are operating out of Russia. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of this agreement between the Russian authorities and these cybercrime gangs that it's as long as you're not targeting any of our stuff, we're just going to look the other way.
Our countries, right? If you're not targeting these countries in the Eastern European bloc, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, so as long as you're avoiding, Russia, Ukraine, former Soviet bloc countries, that sort of thing, then it's pretty much just kind of look the other way and carry on as you do.
So what are they doing with the keyboards? Because this is the part of the story for folks at home. If you have Russian keyboard set up, I mean, basically, if you have the keys installed with your Windows registry and Russian, you're not going to be vulnerable to ransomware?
Yeah, malware? So a lot of their malware is explicitly checking for language settings. What language is this device using? Is it, if you're using a Russian Cyrillic keyboard, then you're probably going to be in one of the countries that they shouldn't be infecting. So that's just kind of the easy way that they've been avoiding, installing and not stepping on the toes of the government there. So it's interesting that this is now starting to come to light. And I think this tactic may be burned at this point. I think a lot of people are just going to be installing, a Russian keyboard just in your language settings and just toggle back to the normal one. Because that's all it's looking for is the presence. It's not looking for anything, really sophisticated beyond that. So I think they're going to start pivoting towards like maybe GeoIP checks, or maybe checking like the native language of the operating system, not just the input methods. Yeah. It seems like a bit of a whack-a-mole.
Which is fascinating because, these ransomware operators, they take a lot of great care into being geopolitical. They operate out of the Eastern European bloc. They want to make sure that their malware is engineered that it doesn't come back to bite them and bring the heat on them from their own countries. So, and that's the thing. The bad guys are just going to change things up for us. I mean, they know that. And if you try to add any sort of entries to your Windows registry, and you specify that the system is running on a virtual machine, it doesn't matter. I mean, malware, that's not going to stop malware either. So it's these defense tricks. Yeah, it's great to know, but the bad guys are going to keep changing their tactics and techniques.
Yeah.
So, all right, we got one last story, and this is the moment of the presentation. I know you guys love this. Gaslighting. Yeah, we got to talk about stalking for a moment and Airtags. The first thing I thought of, Forrest, when these Airtags came out, I thought, oh my gosh, these are great for stalking. Not that I want to do any kind of stalking or anything like that, but I lose my dog and I want to track my dog down if I have it in the dog collar.
Yep.
But then I find out that these things are hackable. Like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So this researcher out of Germany, apparently, have you seen anything about this too?
I didn't see where he came from. I just saw kind of the end result.
And he broke into the microcontroller on the Apple Airtags. These things are brand new, folks. They've only been out like 2-3 weeks. And now that a researcher is able to claim that he can actually modify the NFC, the URL for the lost mode. Now, there are some anti-stalking measures in these devices, but I mean, these are nothing new. These kind of tools have been around a while.
Yeah. You've had like your little, keychain tile or whatever. Those have been around for a bit. There's been other, various spy stalky devices that try and record GPS over time, sorts of things. But I think the biggest thing here was, this was something that's off the shelf.
Yeah.
And Apple did try to implement some countermeasures. If you have an Apple phone, it will send a notification saying, "Hey, there's there's been this AirTag that's been near you, for like 3 days or something." So it's
it only works on an Apple phone.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So anybody that doesn't have an iPhone is kind of out of luck at that point.
Or imagine if you had the volume turned down and you didn't hear the chirp.
So the chirp is from the AirTag itself.
Okay.
So it's the entire thing. It's not like a piezo speaker. It actually has just like a voice coil built into it itself.
Okay.
And the entire casing is kind of the speaker, so to speak. So you can actually muffle the speaker itself by having something pressed against it. Alternatively, it looks like to hack it to the level that this German guy did, you actually have to take it apart. At that point, if you're taking apart the device, you could just sever the voice coil copper traces, and it will no longer be transmitting and making a noise. So I think there's some interesting countermeasures to that. I think somebody that is seriously looking to stalk somebody would probably look for an alternative device that wouldn't have kind of those hurdles to try and jump over. And ultimately, even if you are being targeted by one of these modified devices, you can still find it with like an RF sniffer.
Yeah.
So you can use that to find any kind of GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, NFC, any of those kind of devices that are going to be responding to RF.
Which I'm fascinated by these devices, and I'm fascinated that you could be in a mall in a bar, wherever you're at, and somebody slips one of these little devices, tracking devices, into your bag or attaches it to your car, and who knows what they can do with this kind of data. So Apple has some explaining to do, definitely on this thing, and we'll keep you posted as the story changes and evolves. So we have one last story to talk about, and then we're gonna wrap it up. And the story, of course, Forrest, is about Venmo. And I know this. You're a privacy guy, and I know you want to get on your soapbox, dude. But yeah. The Venmo thing with Joe Biden, President Biden. That blew my mind. And it's what's the takeaway, Forrest, in this whole Venmo story?
Yeah. So Venmo has been very, I would say, privacy hostile since day one. All of the transaction defaults are, public by default. It's opt-in privacy, as opposed to opt-out, which, after Apple's privacy updates, we saw 96% of people,
something huge, like that,
did not opt in to tracking. So yeah, people want this stuff. They definitely do not want, stuff being on blast all the time. And so people were able to find social graphs of Joe Biden and his, 12 family members, and just kind of networked out from there, and just seeing who's interacting with who. And there's a great real world example of this with my therapist. So I actually pay him through Venmo, and I was able to see transaction history, and I can see all the people that go to this same therapist. And, just all the transactions that they're publicly broadcasting.
I'm gonna have to check my wife's physical therapist stuff too.
And that's the thing, is all of my therapist stuff is set to private, but it's all the people that are paying him don't have their stuff set to private. So it's this big network effect where you have to go in and
it's amazing how easy trackable our social and financial relationships are with Venmo. And it's like this for multiple apps, folks. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that we need to be raising questions on and making a bigger stink about it. So
most definitely.
And there's nothing wrong with Joe Biden buying an ice cream through Venmo, right? But it's how that privacy is being handled. So
there's also another similar one pretty recently was Twitter's tip jar. Did you see this one?
No, I did not see this one.
Okay, so Twitter set up this tip jar kind of functionality where you can send somebody money through PayPal. I thought your tweet was awesome. Here's $1. Problem is, PayPal, when you make a payment to them, it displays the person's name and address.
What?
When you send them a payment.
So this?
Yeah, so you could potentially dox somebody by sending them a tip through Twitter.
Wow. All right,
Pretty
I'm going to
nutty.
look this one up too.
Yeah.
Well, that's our show, folks. I hope you had fun. I know we did. We love having you join us every week.
Always a blast.
Yeah, please hit the subscribe button, smash that like button as well. We'll see you next week, and as always, Forrest, thanks for hanging around with me.
Well, take care.